Hi, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Southern Fried Podcast, a production of the Arkansas Democrat Gazette. I'm Rex Nelson, senior editor of the Democrat Gazette, and we're going to stay right here where we're taping for today's show, and that's downtown Little Rock. Some exciting things going on in our downtown neighborhood, and one of them is right across Scott Street from where we're taping right now at Christ Episcopal Church. I was fortunate enough a few weeks ago to have a tour, hear what's going on with two longtime leaders in our city, Mark Grobmyer, Rush Deacon. Thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Rex.
Glad to be here. Thanks, Rex.
I have to tell you, I've got some columns coming up on downtown Little Rock, including one I'm going to do on Christ Episcopal, but I have to tell you how I started one, Mark, recently. Speaking of our neighborhood, I walked from the office here at the Democrat Gazette over to the downtown Hilton Garden Inn to speak to all of the managers of the Beechwood Pinnacle Hotel Group from around the state. And Wally Allen was introducing me and surprised me in the introduction when he put up on the screen an old picture of when I was editor of Arkansas Business Rush and did a big article in 1991 on the Little Rock 2000 plan. And he put up the picture of what I called the triplets at the time, and that was Mark Grobmyer, Jamie Moses, and Wally Allen, and I couldn't believe he still had that photo, but put it up there. But it brought back some memories. We've known each other a long time and been involved in downtown for a long time.
Well, that's true, and I think just about everything that was envisioned in Project 2000 has actually come about.
Actually happened. And I write that. Sometimes, and Rush, you and I have been involved in politics and other things through the years. And as you know, sometimes you have to float an idea out there. It may fail initially, but it gives it traction sometimes.
You know, my office with the Arkansas Capital Corporation is now at the corner of 3rd and River Market.
Yep.
That 7-story building, the top 2 floors condos and offices below. And if it's interesting because you can look out every side of that building, and since that building went up, there's something new looking out every side of that building, north, south, east, and west.
It really is, and I don't think that most Arkansans are really aware of just how much is going on right now in downtown Little Rock. My office is on the 3rd floor of this building. I can look out my window and I can see on one corner of Capitol and Main, the Boyle building being redone after decades of being empty, looking beautiful. On the other side, I can see the expansion of the Little Rock Tech Park in this neighborhood. And at a time when so many downtowns across America are really struggling to get workers to come back in a post-pandemic era, that's really exciting, Mark, to be able to look out of my office window and see construction projects going on, fencing up.
You'll be seeing one more at Christ Episcopal Church.
And that's what we want to talk about. You are co-chairman, Rush, of the fundraising campaign. We'll get into a little of the history of the church because it has a wonderful history, but how about an overview of what you're trying to do here at on the corner of Capitol and Scott right now?
Sure. Well, it is a wonderful historic building that's been around on that site since 1839, almost as long as Arkansas has been a state.
Absolutely, 1836.
There you go, just
Arkansas
3 years
became a
trailing
state.
that.
Yep.
Christ Episcopal Church came along, built the first structure on that site, 1841. And we'll go on into the history. But what we're doing now is renovating the existing property, making it more modern, making it more accessible to the community, and opening up what was a 1980s addition to the Scott Street side of the parish house, taking that out putting in a green space and making it a much more beautiful feature of the downtown area.
Yeah, it really an exciting project. And Mark, as you know, and you knew the way to my heart, knowing that I'm an Arkansas history nerd, but as Rush said, a lot of history on that corner there.
Well, absolutely, and one of the things I think we'll talk about today is the connection of General Douglas MacArthur to that church.
Yeah, let's talk about it. Of course, I think most of our listeners realize that General MacArthur was born here, but talk about the connection to the church.
Well, General MacArthur was in fact born here at the Arsenal building in what's now known as MacArthur Park, and that building is now the MacArthur Museum of Military History. Next to it is a wonderful Korean War memorial that was dedicated a few years ago, and obviously General MacArthur was the head of the United Nations troops that defended Korea. But way back in the 1880s, when his dad was the commandant at the Arsenal building, who was, by the way, a Civil War Medal of Honor winner, General MacArthur was born, and he and his brother were baptized at Christ Episcopal Church, where the parents were enrolled at the church at the time. And that maybe seemed like an insignificant event at the time, but General MacArthur went on over the years to be the highest ranking military officer, probably the most historic military officer in the history of the U.S. military. And when he came back to the United States after years of service, in I believe it was 1952, he went to Christ Episcopal Church and attended services there. And we'll get into it more, but during the war, it played a pivotal role in his confidence and his morale and the morale of his troops during the war.
And I want to continue this thread while you're on it here. He became, of course, after the war, with the rebuilding of Southeast Asia, a hero in so many areas there. And Mark, I know you have long believed that Little Rock should take better advantage of being the hometown of Douglas MacArthur in attracting capital and attracting visitors from that part of the world.
Well, as we all know, Japan is one of the largest investors in the United States as a foreign country, the businesses of Japan. Korea is rapidly catching up to Japan in that regard. And one of the things that we have that other states don't have when trying to attract foreign investment, foreign direct investment, in that part of the world is the connection with General MacArthur. And I frequently take international visitors to see his birthplace and to Christ Episcopal Church. And you can see a very visceral connection that these people, many of these people have, and gratitude for General MacArthur and what he did for those countries. First of all, with Japan, after the war, he literally helped write the Constitution that enshrined the women that have the right to vote, enshrined freedom of religion, created the economic foundation for the rebirth of Japan. And then with respect to Korea, not only had he helped in World War II to liberate Korea, but in the Korean War, he defended Korea against an onslaught from the North and from the Chinese. So the feeling these people have in their heart for General MacArthur is profound. And when they come to understand that he referred to Christ Church as his spiritual home, it's moving for them. And it helps create a bond that we have with these people that other places don't.
Yeah. So, Rush, I guess part of what we're saying here is with the renewal of this building, this historic site that you have planned, not only is that good for the members of Christ Episcopal, but perhaps yet another tourist attraction for Little Rock.
Absolutely. It's for all of the downtown community. Actually, I will be going to Korea next month and meeting with some business leaders about the
Wow.
opportunity that we want to give them to
Uh-huh.
invest in what we have going on at Christ Church and in downtown Little Rock. And it's an exciting opportunity.
Many people believe that the next big thing in Arkansas is lithium. Hi, I'm Ainsley Platt, an environment reporter at the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette. For months, I've been covering efforts to bring lithium extraction to Arkansas and the roadblocks that have popped up along the way. The lithium held in the brines underneath South Arkansas could help the U.S. meet its goal of developing a domestic supply of a critical mineral that powers everything from electric vehicles to iPhones. However, a recent Arkansas Oil and Gas Commission decision has thrown a new wrench in those efforts, potentially endangering hundreds of millions in investment in extraction projects. I want to make sure you stay informed about how these decisions might affect you and your community. If you find this kind of reporting valuable, you can support my work by subscribing at arkansasonline.com/ADG now.
Yeah. Go into some of the details. Walk me through exactly what is planned. I know there's going to be a tear down of a more modern part. Just kind of some steps so those who are familiar with this corner of downtown can kind of visualize what's going to be happening once construction starts.
Sure. Interestingly, Christ Church has been on that corner of downtown since 1839. And this is the third church building on that corner. The first one finished in 1841, burned in 1873. They rebuilt a second church, which burned down in 1938, I believe, Mark. And then the latest church building was built in 1941. Ed Cromwell was the architect.
Very famous Little Rock architect.
And Reverend Witzel was the rector of the church at the time, another famous name in architecture for Little Rock and state of Arkansas. But what we're doing now is between the second and third church building that was built, there was a parish house added by Reverend Witzel. And it served as for recreation, community activities, etc. And that church parish house was covered up in the 1980s by an addition that added some offices and other space. We're actually going to be taking down that 1980s front. And we've met with the historic preservation folks of Arkansas, and they have said it does not qualify for historic register status with the addition of the 1980 frontage, but as we take that down, they believe that will thereafter qualify for National Historic Register status.
Interesting.
So that's not why we're doing it, but it's a bonus for doing that. We're opening up the original facade, and as you know, the facade of any structure is very important in terms of its historic status.
Right.
And then from a Scott Street view, the view from your offices looking across the street, that's the main thing that you will see.
That will come down. Okay.
Inside, you're doing a lot of renovation of kitchens and restrooms and meeting space. What's now called Park Hall, which is an area, a gathering space, will actually go out towards the towards the south, and have a terrace area, so indoor, outdoor meeting space, things that make the church property much more user-friendly, more community-focused, and then obviously modernizing a lot of the things that need to be modernized.
Absolutely. It's exciting. I know you're in the fundraising stage right now, but give me a sense of the timetable. When do you think we're going to see construction start, and then when do you think we'll be finished with that?
I think we're targeting starting construction probably June of this year, so we're just a few months away from that. We've had a very successful campaign where we've raised our target, and we're hoping to get some extra funds to do all of what we want to do. It's part of the reason I'm going to be talking to folks in Korea about whether they'd like to contribute to a MacArthur Commons area that we've talked about.
Interesting that we would have a MacArthur Commons now to go with our MacArthur Park. Mark, let's go back to the idea of attracting people from Japan, people from Korea, the Philippines, other places that automatically know the name MacArthur. You mentioned you take them. The Arsenal building is still there as a museum now. The park's named MacArthur. Throw in the Korean Memorial you talked about. The church. How do you package all of that, and how do you market that to get people to Little Rock?
Well, it's interesting. Many years ago, when Bill Clinton was governor, and he'd go overseas to try to talk about
Trade missions,
and people would not know where Arkansas was. And so he finally started using the name Fulbright because there's some 200,000 Fulbright scholars around the world who studied in the U.S. and went back. So immediately they knew the name Fulbright. And so that started us thinking at the time and since, what other Arkansans do people know that they can identify with? Of course, Sam Walton and Jack Stevens and the Clintons now and so forth.
Absolutely.
But one that's not mentioned frequently is MacArthur. Yet the people of the Philippines, the people of Taiwan, the people of Korea, the people of Japan, they have a lot of reverence for him because he was sort of their George Washington and Jesus Christ wrapped into one, as far as their liberation and giving them the rights that they have today. And so a lot of them feel a debt of gratitude. Another little story folks don't know is that after World War II, Heifer International sent some 3,000 dairy cows to Japan when the children had no milk because they'd slaughtered all of the dairy cows for the army. And so they rebuilt the dairy herd. And at Heifer, there's scrolls handwritten by, I think, 6 prefects in Japan, thanking the people of Heifer and the people of Arkansas for doing that. And so what we're trying to do is create what we call a technology deployment bridge. The AEDC and Governor Sanders has opened an office in Korea now. And so we're trying to marshal all of the connections that we can think of to appeal to Korean investors to come to Arkansas. We're trying to create a landing pad here for them to come, feel welcome, and expand throughout the United States from a base in Arkansas.
Very, very exciting. And speaking of exciting, Rush, I want to get back to what I was talking about a minute ago. I mentioned the technology park expansion. I mentioned the Boyle building. I found out what you were doing, and it really fit into the bigger picture because just east down Capitol, right past the church, Central Arkansas Water, thankfully for downtown, made the decision to stay downtown. They're going to be spending millions of dollars renovating their headquarters building. And just in the last few weeks, a multi-million-dollar grant announced for the Transit Center, which has plans to put residential commercial over the bus transfer station. So right here in this one neighborhood, within sight distance, a few yards in some cases of the church. Again, a whole lot going on right now, or about to go on.
Absolutely. I mean, you see many downtowns, as you were making a note of before, that are dying or in being disregarded. But this area of downtown has the ability to regrow itself, and with some good energy, that's happening.
Yeah, absolutely. And when I go to a city, whether it's New York City, Chicago, historic churches are part of the draw to me. I love that. And again, you've got such a historic site. When I did the tour with you, you were nice enough to give me an entire book that was done just on the stained glass windows at Christ Episcopal, which have quite a history.
Right. Well, those were built in 1940, and it was a German company out of their New York operations that built those. We were needed to do restoration of those stained glass windows a few years ago, and so we actually, over a 2+ year period, had that same German company come in and take section by section with scaffolding, take out all of those windows, ship them to Germany, reconstruct in some cases, and certainly renovate those windows and bring them back and reinstall them with protection so that they won't be subject to vandalism in the future, but also restoring the beauty and seeing the light come through in ways that radiate through into the church.
Decisions made in Washington affect folks in Arkansas. I'm Alex Thomas, the Washington correspondent for the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette. I'm keeping a close eye on what happens in the nation's capital and how decisions and decision makers impact our state. Take, for instance, the next farm bill. We're connecting you with the policymakers drafting this legislation, as well as the Arkansas farmers vital to this state's economy. I know how much these decisions matter to everyday Arkansans, which is why I'm here in Washington, making sure you stay informed. This kind of coverage is only possible through your support. So consider subscribing at arkansasonline.com/ADG now.
Yeah, and certainly, Mark, in addition to the MacArthur connection, those windows alone add another attraction to Christ Episcopal.
Well, as the book indicates, they tell the whole story of the Christian church from
Absolutely.
the very beginning, and then also the church history of the church in Arkansas, the Episcopal Church in Arkansas. So it's a historic as well as an artistic piece of work.
Yeah.
Stained glass window collection.
It really is. Again, and the fact that you're not only updating bathrooms, kitchens, as you said, things like that, but helping with the continued restoration and protecting that which is historic makes it a really interesting project. It's not just new things, but it's keeping old things safe and even more beautiful.
Yeah, we spent well over $1 million just restoring the stained glass windows. As you can imagine, taking them out, shipping them to Germany, restoring them, and bringing them back was quite an undertaking.
Rex, I'll say this in respect to the Japanese and the Koreans and the other Asians, they want to attend church services there when they come to Arkansas.
Interesting.
And just so you know, literally on January 26th, the Koreans issued a medal to MacArthur, long overdue, but it's amazing what they have done. And then also, with respect to the Japanese, I came across this recently. This was a joint resolution from the Diet, or the Congress in Japan, that said the entire Japanese nation is grateful to General Douglas MacArthur, former Supreme Commander of the Allied Powers, for saving Japanese during the post-war confusion and destitution. His assistance and guidance in the establishment of the democratic principles and economic works of Japan accelerated the restoration and sovereignty of Japan. This was, in effect, a joint resolution of Congress, equivalent in the United States.
Yeah.
So this is, and you have to see these people when they enter that church, the foreign visitors, literally the reverence that they have for that place and the connection to General MacArthur, which is why when he came back to the U.S. after his long tour in Asia, he insisted to go there and attend services there.
Yeah.
And it was very meaningful.
So, Mark, do you think the fact you mentioned that, when Bill Clinton as governor would go overseas, that he would use the Fulbright connection, and do you think the fact that we have never played to this strength, the strength being that Douglas MacArthur was born here, does it go back to some of that, him just saying, well, kind of an accident that I was born in Arkansas and I consider myself a Virginian?
Well, he never said that. It was his mother who said that.
Okay.
His mother was a very dyed-in-the-wool old Virginia family from Norfolk.
I lived in Washington, D.C. for a number of years. I know how those Virginians can be. There is a saying, Rush, you may have heard it, how many Virginians does it take to screw in a light bulb? 4, 1 to screw it in, and 3 to talk about how good the old bulb was. Virginians love their history, though.
Well,
Yeah.
so she basically insisted that he be buried there, even though he actually spent more time in Little Rock than he did in Norfolk as an adult.
Gotcha.
He went there sometimes to visit as a child, but so I think we have as legitimate a claim as Norfolk, Virginia does to be a MacArthur historical place to visit.
Yeah.
And particularly since he did say, and I don't want to get into all of it, but you know, in the darkest days of the war, in early 42, he asked the church to pray for him and his men, and the minister at the time wrote a prayer. It literally made its way to the front page of the New York Times. Mm-hmm. And that Easter, telegrams from around the country came into Little Rock to Christ Church because it was recognized as the spiritual home of General MacArthur. And so it was referenced at the time that Little Rock and Christ Church was the spiritual center of the United States in March of 1942.
Yeah.
And I think that was Reverend Witzel at the time. Right?
Ah, okay. Well, to broaden the picture again a little bit, I mentioned playing to the MacArthur strength as part of what we can do to attract people here. Also was talking about how much was going on downtown, and you mentioned, Rush, your office is downtown just like mine, but we're also in the very early stages, of fundraising of what's going to be a major attraction of the Clinton Presidential Center, a major addition to the Clinton Presidential Center, where we're going to have a Hillary Clinton wing. And I tell people, regardless of your politics, Hillary Rodham Clinton is one of the most famous women of all time. And I have no doubt that when that wing is completed, that will bring thousands of additional visitors to downtown Little Rock on an annual basis.
Certainly.
To see that. So yet something else we needed to mention that's going
Absolutely.
on downtown or about to go on.
In my current activities, I deal a lot with international investors that are investing in the United States. And so they are often visiting here. And we take them, obviously, to the Clinton Center for tours there. And the fact that actually Mark and I were in law school at the same time, Bill and Hillary were both professors there at the law school. So it's like there's a connection there that everyone can understand and appreciate.
Rex, in addition, I mentioned earlier Senator Fulbright.
Yes, absolutely. And you've talk a little bit, we're about to run out of time, but a little bit about the work that you have done to bring together Fulbright scholars from around the world.
We have an organization called the Global Solutions Institute that arose out of a meeting at the Clinton Library between the Club Madrid, which is a group of former presidents and prime ministers from 115 countries, and another group, the P80, founded by then Prince Charles, work with pension funds. And what came out of that was we need a better system globally to deploy problem-solving solutions. And so after struggling to find the best way to do that, we have determined that really the best way to do it is to create committees of Fulbright Scholar alumni in all 160 countries where they operate.
Great idea.
Because we had not our idea, the Vietnamese came to one of our meetings and they said 60% of the government ministers in Vietnam are Fulbright Scholar alumni.
Unreal.
They said we could create a committee to look at solutions and see if they're needed in Vietnam, and if so, then we'll find the right way to deploy them. So light bulb goes off, and we said, well, what if we had a committee like that in all 160 countries to take advantage of the fact there's 200,000 Fulbright Scholar alumni that our country has invested in by giving them money to get advanced degrees and go home. So that center will be here in Arkansas as well.
Oh, and that again, very exciting as we look at the future. About to run out of time, Mark. I started back in 1991. Time flies. I'm not going to say how many years ago that was. I'll start feeling old. But time flies when you're having fun. But mentioning all I mentioned, are you as optimistic about the future of downtown Little Rock as you were back then?
Well, I'm so optimistic I live in downtown Little Rock.
There you go. It's home.
Yeah. So yes, I think it's great. I think it's certainly growing. Many more young people are living in the downtown area on both sides of the river. The trolley thing is a tool that can connect the two sides of the river, and the young people like that. So and the parks are wonderful. Yes, I'm very optimistic about downtown Little Rock.
Yeah, and Rush, thank you for what you're doing. I know there's still more money to be raised, but thanks for all that you're doing on this one certainly very historic corner of downtown Little Rock, Christ Episcopal at Capitol and Scott.
Thank you, Rex.
And you're my neighbor, so I want to see the neighborhood doing good here from the Democrat Gazette. If you count the Gazette's history too, the oldest newspaper west of the Mississippi. So there's another piece of history in downtown Little Rock, and you can kind of feel the history when you walk into this building also. So I really have enjoyed the discussion about downtown, and coming to this building every day. I'll be able to watch your work literally on a daily basis once it starts.
Well, and I'm going to talk to Eliza about putting up a camera so we can do a time lapse of the work.
I like it. I like
We'll
it.
have to put it up in your building,
Yeah,
looking across the
across
street at
the
what we
street.
do. So looking forward to that.
I like it. Big things happening at historic Christ Episcopal Church in downtown Little Rock. Thanks to Rush Deacon. Thanks to Mark Grobmyer for joining us today to talk about it. You've been listening to the Southern Fried Podcast, a production of the Arkansas Democrat Gazette.